Joining us now with more on the government's legal challenges and judicial reform proposals is legal affairs correspondent with the Jerusalem Post, Michael Starr. So, Michael, over 100,000 protesters in Tel Aviv and many thousands more in other cities. It does appear that the anti-judicial reform movement is picking up steam, but doesn't have a path to victory, you think?
Well, these protests do seem to be going on. They're going to be continuing for the foreseeable future. All the protest parties seem to be, quite taken with the amount of presence that have been made at these protests. We saw them begin in Tel Aviv, and they've been creeping along to other cities as well. All the protest organizations have said that they're going to be holding protests this coming Saturday as well. There were protests today as well by youth groups. More and more groups are getting involved. You're seeing groups like the robes movement. But whether they have any lasting impact, whether they can force the government's hand, that remains to be seen. We're seeing these protests, spirit manifesting as well in the official political forums, with the opposition boycotting the law committee today when they're discussing the basic law, the judiciary amendment as part of the judicial reforms. There is a discussion going on. There is room for compromise, I believe, with the coalition. Question is if the opposition is willing to take advantage of that or not, or if they think they can force the coalition solely based off of the momentum of the protest. That does remain to be seen.
Now, Michael, from what you can tell, is the protest movement only made up of Never Bibi voters, or are there some other Likud types who say this extreme reform is not what they voted for? Who are the voices actually protesting there?
Well, there does seem to be a broad coalition of protesters. I think that the coalition supporters would have you believe that it's simply, far left movements that are just pro-Palestinian causes or anti-Israel causes to try to explain it away as extremism. But as we can see, it does have broad support based on numbers, and we do see people who are concerned not on the political level, but on the ideological or legal level. You see movements of lawyers and educators who are concerned about how this will impact the legal system, and you see people who are consider themselves pro-democracy activists who are concerned that we're going to be removing a vital check and balance to an already weak system when it comes to check and balances. So you do see a very broad coalition. Whether there is a movement on to include the right-wing movement, so to speak, within that anti-reform coalition, it hasn't expressed itself as far as I can see, but maybe in the future.
Now, we're constantly hearing that it's everyone's demonstration. Now, moving on to Deri, what are the government's next moves after the High Court forced Netanyahu to fire him today? Is it fair to say that the coalition has hardened its stance and will push for most far-reaching judicial reforms?
Well, it is interesting because it's very hard at this point to disentangle the judicial reforms from the Deri case. This is both from the left and from the right, or anti-reform, pro-reform, however you want to phrase it or frame it. Both sides see the reform and Deri as being connected. Either they, during the, following the Deri ruling, in which it was ruled that Benjamin Netanyahu had to fire former Minister Deri, left-wing and anti-reform protesters saw this, or stated rather explicitly, that this was part of their continuing fight against the judicial reform and to push on harder. And on the contrary to this, was that the protesters, the anti-reform, or the pro-reform rather, said this was a trigger or this was a reason for why the judicial reforms should be pushed on. And this is, in part because, the judicial reforms already contained items, already contained provisions that were deeply connected to the case of Aryeh Deri and why he should be fired from his position. How could this, affect things in the future? There is, I guess you could say, getting rid of the provision that led to Aryeh Deri's removal, a sort of comeback, getting rid of the reasonableness clause under which most of the High Court's ruling was under. And there's also the introduction of the override clause, which would allow the striking of High Court rulings with a simple majority of 61 in the Knesset. And there are also other proposals that are rumors that are floating that from Shas activists that they could seek some other form of legislation that could see Aryeh Deri reinstated in some sort of other political position, although I imagine this would also be subject to the reasonableness clause, as is. Without any substantial change to this clause, it seems to be unlikely that this such an appointment would be met without any significant challenge. There was talk about him becoming alternate prime minister. If he is to become a minister, and it was unreasonable, even more so, I think, if he would become prime minister. Besides that, he would have to go through an additional hearing to become prime minister.
Michael Starr, thank you so much. We'll be right back with you.